So as I said, thank you for joining us to our webinar series on FASD and the law. I will be your moderator for today. I do have our Secretariat support staff here helping out. So you'll see Erin Paquette on the screen, who is my co-host, Andrew Fairburn, who will be helping to support, keep us on track. Our speaker today has lots to share with you, so we want to make sure that we can get through as much as possible and allow time for questions. And Snehal, who will be monitoring our Q&A chat box. We also have two ASL and English interpreters with us today, who you will see on the screen, Anna and Adele. So a little bit about today's webinar. We're obviously beginning now at 12 p.m. We will have an hour in total, hoping to have around 40 minutes of presentation and hold time for Q&A. We can have Q&A at the end of the webinar. However, you may also use the Q&A box during the discussion, and we'll do our best to get to your questions so that David can respond during. The webinar is being recorded, and this recording, as well as the slides and any additional resources, will be mailed to all of the participants following the webinar. And for those who are unable to register but may be interested in the future, we'll also be posting these on the HSJCC website in the coming days. Before we actually turn things over to our speaker today, I will be launching a poll with 2 sets of questions just to get to know who's in the room and interested in hearing what you'd like to learn today. And just a brief background about the HSJCC network. So the Human Services and Justice Coordinating Committee Network, also known as HSJCC, is comprised of committees all across the province. We have 38 local committees, 14 regional committees, and 1 provincial HSJCC. Each of these committees are voluntary collaborations, so folks are doing the work off the side of their desk, and they're collaborations between the health and human services and social service organizations, community mental health and addiction organizations, and partners from the justice sector, including Crown attorneys, judges, police, correctional service, and correctional services providers. So thank you again for joining us. I'm just going to launch our first poll before I introduce our speaker. And I'll leave this open for folks to take a minute. So the questions here today are, from which perspective are you joining us? We have multiple choice. So in terms of whether you're from community mental health and addictions, healthcare, law enforcement, courts, corrections, reintegration services and housing, special population agencies, social services, lived experience of the mental health and/or justice system, or part of a peer support organization. And if, of course, you don't fit into those categories, we're only able to have 10 selections here. Please feel free to write where you're coming from in the chat today. The next question is, what are you hoping to learn? So a background information on FASD, how FASD interacts with the criminal justice system, some tips and tricks for client service providers that are supporting clients, resources that you can learn more about FASD, how assessments work for FASD, or anything else that you're hoping to hear from our speaker. So I see folks are filling that out, and we're at about 70%, so I'll just give it another minute.
Candice, sorry to interrupt. I believe there are some folks having trouble viewing the interpreter. I just wanted to make sure that there was an option to view the gallery. They're only able to see the person who's speaking. It says that there is no option to see the gallery versus the speaker, so I'm not sure if that's something you're able to address on your end.
So I see at the top here, there's a view setting.
Okay. Oh,
to attendee view side-by-side gallery. Does that?
Yep, everyone. Yep.
And you can see in the chat works now. Okay, wonderful. Awesome. Apologies. That's great. I see everyone writing in the chat. Okay, I am going to end the poll just in the interest of time here and share the results so we can see. So it looks like 30% from community mental health and addictions, 4% from healthcare, 6% from law enforcement, 18% from the courts, which is great, 10% from corrections, reintegration services and housing, 6%, special population agencies, this is also fantastic to see, 22%, social services, 14%, 3% with lived experience, and other category 10%, which now I'm hoping you're able to actually write in the chat. Apologies for that. And folks are really interested in learning some background information, so 42%, 70% on specific interactions with the criminal justice system, tips and tricks for service providers, which is great, 71%, resources, 45%, assessments, 32%. So I think really interested in learning about all of these things, and hopefully we're able to cover all of those today. And I'm now going to introduce our speaker for the day. So really pleased to have David Boulding here with us today, a lawyer with extensive experience working with clients who have FASD. You'll see a little write-up about David here and more information about him on his website, which we will be sending out to folks if you'd like to learn a little bit more. With that, David, it is my pleasure to turn it over to you to walk through the agenda for today and kick things off.
Okay, Candace, how's the volume? We're okay? Okay, thanks for the invite. Let's be blunt. This topic we could spend 50 hours on. We don't have 50 hours, and it's going to be a little bit of a hurry sometimes, but some things aren't to be hurried, and I'll tell you what stuff we can go slow is. You'll see the agenda there. It's kind of divided into 4 parts, and a bit of background, and then I'm going to talk about it's a permanent brain-based birth defect, and you have to sort of get that. And finally, we're going to talk about some strategies and then some lessons from other people. So that's essentially the setup. And there's a fellow on your team called Andrew who may be doing. And what that means is, hurry up, David, we're running out of time. At the end of the day, the next 3 or 4 minutes are the most important. And there's one rule. You got to play with me. You got to participate, because this is the main point. So hold your hand up like this. And then that fist is got a fancy name. It's called the RA. It's a little brain on the top of your spinal cord. This is the brain, the snake brain. It's the brain of instincts, digestion, breathing, heart rate, excretion, sex. These are the most basic functions for the animal to survive. Get that? That's a little bump. On top of that bump, put another hand on top of that. This is the dog brain. Now this is jewelry that Lassie is a big improvement over an alligator. So this is the dog brain. And you need to pay attention, because at the end of the day, this is where all your interventions are. The next brain in brain development is like this. It's, the 2 hemispheres, left and right. That's the chimpanzee brain. And you'll agree with me that chimpanzees are a huge improvement on dogs and even more on alligators and crocodiles. Now, the next part is important. So if you've got glasses, take your glasses off, take your hand, stick your fingers in your eye, and grab your forehead. This is the human brain. This is the brain of Mozart, Shakespeare. This put a man on the moon. This is the most sophisticated piece of equipment in the universe. Here's the trick. This brain is not helpful when you're making interventions with this population. So you've now got a degree in neurology. So now let's move on to what is fetal alcohol. Put your hands together like this and make a triangle, and let's pretend it's a pyramid. Now, this is a pyramid of my brain and your brain. 99 floors of solid sandstone. Everything is there. My clients have the same pyramid, except they have skylights. My clients are not like you and I, decreased function. You and I have a series of elevators that go up and down to the right floor at the right time. And some elevators, fight or flight, for example, they get there in a hurry. My clients often have elevators that only hit every second floor. Sometimes they can't get above floor 80. So you need to think in terms of a piece of sandstone that's solid with skylights, and the elevator system is wonky. Now, if you can take this in, the rest of the day is cream cheese on toast and avocado. But you have to take in that this brain is missing pieces. And if it's missing pieces, two things follow. They're not like you and I. And in the development stage, you need this brain to develop that whole set of pathways. If that cell's not there, it doesn't happen. So you've got decreased cognitive ability. Now, if you are sitting at a desk, take your pen and put it on the desk in front of you. Visualize that pen as a single brain cell surrounded by alcohol in the brain. Mom's been drinking until alcohol around the brain. Alcohol is a slippery molecule, and now it slides into the cell. Alcohol is now on both sides of the cell wall. What happens, literally, this is what happens. It's called cell death. The cell explodes. It's not there. It's not that it's damaged. It's not that it's bent. It's not there. This brain is missing pieces. So you have to sort of think. All the drugs, all the therapy, all the time in jail, all your interventions aren't going to bring back brain cells. So you have to accommodate. So you have to do something else. And if you want, it says in the material that that research is from Ed Riley. If you have your lawyer's brief, which I hope you have, this is pretty much everything I got to say in a couple pages, but I want to read the first sentence out loud, because this is the one that hurts. Alcohol in the womb is a solvent, and it acts on the baby's developing brain like paint stripper acts on layers of old paint on furniture. It dissolves brains, bubbles them away. Thus, brain functions are reduced. This is very difficult because in criminal law, we look at, and it goes back to before Sigmund Freud, a test, which is absolutely not helpful here. This is not about mental health, insanity, or this particular psychiatric diagnosis. The brain is missing pieces. It can't do the stuff that you want it to do. If you go down there, there's another paragraph I'd like you to read, and now isn't the time, but you can, number 4, go past judgment and understand why pregnant women drink alcohol. You know the reasons: relationship, partner, violence, all kinds of frustrations. The biggest single indicator how much a woman drinks is how much does her partner drink. Question comes up, who drinks the most while pregnant? There's been a long-term California study. It comes back and it says white women with 4 years of university earning 400% above the poverty line. It makes sense. Who has the money to buy the wine? So we have to stop thinking about this only happens to certain people. So that's pretty scary stuff. Here's the good news. Number 5, there's a fellow called Dr. Claren, Dr. Sterling Claren, and he's a main beam of fetal alcohol. And he has this idea called the external brain. What is an external brain? It's adequate, appropriate supervision, appropriate structures. There's a nice little paragraph there. It could be a neighbor, a probation officer, a priest, someone who can be there to sort of bump the person down the correct path. And it really is a relational issue. And I've got lots of stories about that, but I'm worried that Andrew's going to start banging in tables soon. But if you take a look at the bottom of the first page of the lawyer's brief, it may help you. The external brain is a legal concept. Our duty is a duty of care to accommodate. That's what the charter says. And of course, I always want people to read the charter, but no one ever does, but you should, especially the little picture ones that the government sends out. Now, the charter is a leveling device. The charter aims to bring all of us to the same level of the dominant class. White men over 50 with lots of money. That's the aim. Doesn't always work that way, but it's okay. It's the best we got. So you want to be thinking about charter challenges. And the first one that comes to mind is the big one. If I have a broken arm, I go to a hospital, they fix it. I show up at a hospital with fetal alcohol, they show me the exit door. We need to find ways to get an assessment under the Canada Health Act for the same reason I have a broken arm. That's only going to happen by a charter challenge. Because as people will tell you in assessments, they take 1 to 3 days and they're $5,000 to $15,000, depending on the tools or the people available. Just a couple of quick things from that. You have to change your expectations. Again, it goes back to brain that's missing pieces. You wouldn't tell a blind kid in a math class to look harder at the blackboard. You're going to ask a kid in a wheelchair to run the 100-meter hurdles. You have to change. You have to change because they're not going to change. Their brain is fixed. And the other thing we need to talk about is changing their environment. And there are two environments. One is the world around them, and I like no-go and no contact orders. But you also have to create a relationship so that the part inside has someone to talk to, because these people have a life of endless frustration. Now, I see Andrew giving me the evil look, so we will move on quite quickly. Thank you, Andrew. I'm on page 4 now. This is a simple topic. Why do they break the law? Most crime is opportunistic. Crimes that require planning, like sophisticated fraud crimes, they require enormous brain power. Those people are really bright. They don't show up in the court very often. Most of my clients are there for breach of probation, theft unders, joyriding, silly shit. And there's an excellent book by a federal probation officer, Dennis Bolin, Bolen, and it's called Stupid Crime. That tells you everything you need to know right there. Think a brain is missing pieces, a life of frustration, no friends, primary and secondary disabilities. And if you have a timeline in your life of 15 minutes, crime seems to be an answer in the moment. So think spur of the moment stupidity. Let's be blunt. Do you think the cops catch the smart crimes? We all know they don't. Anyways, talked about that. Now let's look at strategies. If you buy one book, you buy this book. It's 86 pages. It's tremendous. I put the whole book into evidence in a trial in Colorado. They were looking for 15 years in jail. We got probation. And how did we get that? Right there on your screen, it is primary and secondary disabilities. So you want to look at these things and you see the primary characteristics and you got a list there. Then you've got the secondary characteristics. Learn this. You can't fix the primary. You can work with the secondary. You can work with frustration, anxiety, being isolated, family challenges, depression, sex problems. That's where your relationship works. That's where you're with this dog brain. Because at the end of the day, you are not able to put new brain cells into that brain. So I've told you to buy that book. We've done the then there's the second, here it is right here. I sent Candace, these are some sheets that are from this book, which is Diane's second book. This is much more expensive. I think it's $20. But you can see mine's got all these little colored stickies on it. It's kind of book for people that are looking to understand what am I doing wrong and what interventions are possible. I don't need to spend time. You can read this book. You can figure it out. Name of the book is Fetal Alcohol, Neurobehavioral Conditions, Understanding and Application of a Brain-Based Approach, a collection of information for parents and professionals. And I sent Candace a copy of that title. Now, here's the magic question. How to do assessments? Well, it's simple. Pony up $15,000 or listen carefully for the next 5 minutes. There's a doctor that developed a tool here in British Columbia to teach the police, and it should be set out in your thing. It's called ALARM, A-L-A-R-M. It's a mnemonic. A stands for adaptive behaviors. You need to learn to use the Vineland scales. Adaptive behaviors are those secret social rules that aren't written down. You don't show up at a funeral and complain about the Toronto Maple Leafs to the wife. That's a social rule. We could move on, Aaron, in some of those screens and get to the next one. So there are ALARM, and there's questions in each area. Adaptive behaviors. Learn about the social things. He's standing outside in Saskatoon, it's 44 below, and he's wearing a t-shirt. So there are all kinds of things that you can learn. The next one, there's a good page right there. Language. Look into their language. My clients would always come up to me and tell me things about mens rea and actors reus. They had no idea what those words mean, but they hear lawyers use them. What these words are is a way of, you can be my friend, because I know your words. So you want to look for that. Attention is really funny. I call it, oh, look, a shiny penny. Because at the end of the day, their brain is missing pieces and their attention span can be really quite surprisingly brief. And this is another problem that you'll see. You'll be talking about something and you're going to have to repeat it. You're going to have to repeat it, and you're going to have to repeat it next week. Quick story, a probation officer in South Dakota had this special program for this shoplifter, and she was so happy after a week of speaking to this fellow, and she's walking down her office and out to the reception and out sort of the office, and the kid smiles at her, they thank, and he turns away, takes 4 or 5 steps, picks up the stapler from the secretary's desk, puts it in his pocket, and keeps on walking. That was the moment that social worker got fetal alcohol. That's when she realized that all of her talk was like seagulls flying over the dump. The next one is reasoning. Simple solution. Don't fight at school. Don't fight at school. There's an incident the next day. I wasn't. It was on the way home. So the lesson is don't fight. But the specific, don't fight at school, that's not the same thing as fighting on the way home. So you're going to start looking at concrete examples. This is difficult. Repetition. And it's really hard. There's a judge in Alaska, he's now retired, Michael, and Michael always used to say, just because you said it doesn't mean he got it. And just because you made him stand there and repeat what you said doesn't mean he got it. It takes repetition with heart. The big one is memory. Memory is the foundation of civilization. If you can't remember what you did last Tuesday, you're going to make the same mistakes. And that's a real problem when you're dealing with saber-toothed tigers and mastodons and freezing and trying to start fires and what burns and what doesn't burn. So memory is what separates people on the hierarchy. If you can remember various things and put things together, that's a skill. Now think about a brain with holes in it. Think about a brain that doesn't remember things. And there's a whole bunch of material on the internet. You can look her up. Her name is Jan Lutke, Lutke. She's from BC. She's wonderful. She has lots of materials. And another woman is Deb Evanson, Evensen. And she has a book published by the Yukon government. It's free. It's called Making a Difference. It's fabulous. But these are the kind of people and the kind of resources you have to say. You can't see behind me, but I have 2 4-high filing cabinets and a desk that's full of materials. And I have a bookshelf over there that's 4 feet high, 3 feet wide, full of books. I'm not suggesting that you buy all these books. And here's an example. Don't buy this book. It's 164 pages. Sorry, it's $164. That's a lot of money. That particular book, it's written by psychiatrists and famous researchers. He's a nice guy, I met him. But the whole book is reduced to one sentence, and I'll read it to you. The neuropsychiatric presentation of FASD can often be unrecognized. This is a psychiatrist talking. This is a research guy talking. Or misunderstood. FASD are the true clinical masqueraders, and attention deficit disorder is their most likely disguise. And you'll see this in, you get 2 or 3 probation reports, and each replacement report will say, well, he's got anger problems, he's got this social problem, and they'll list various things out of the DSM. You get 2 or 3 of them, you'll have 7 different things because they masquerade as something else. Yes, of course he's got anger issues. He's a square peg in a round hole. Of course he's got social engine. He has no friends. But essentially, you have to go under. A friend of mine who's a very famous therapist used to do this all the time. What's underneath that? What's underneath that? And that takes a bit of digging. You're hurrying along, Andrew. I'm hurrying along. I'm on page 7 now. We're roaring right along here. I know I sound naive, but relationship is the key. And I know that from my experience, but I also know that because when I was a young lawyer, I met several brilliant 50 and 60-year-old probation officers. They never quite got their ties straight. And they always had a whole bunch of files. And they were always, oh, ask Michael to do it. Oh, ask me to do it. Because they knew, I spent a lot of time in young offenders court. They knew what to do. They didn't have any magic answers, but they knew they had a way of working with kids that was non-threatening, and the kids would open up to them. And I'm quite convinced that eventually some of these older PO guys were successful in reducing the number of appearances in young offender court because they had, this is before fetal alcohol was even named, this because they had an intuitive sense there's a person in there who's struggling. And it's easy to see some people struggling. Down syndrome, we just have to look at the face. In a wheelchair, we see a machine. If someone is deaf or blind, it's really easy, and we automatically accommodate. This is an invisible, brain-based birth defect. They didn't choose this. There's no psychotherapy is going to make them a better person. I mean, it may help them with their frustration, it may help them with their sex life, it may help them in some area, and that's the secondary part that I'd like you to get. I'll say it again, I'll say it again, I'll say it again, I'll say it again. Somebody's got to bring a charter application to get these assessments because they are Canadian citizens like you and I. So let's go to assessments by you. In the materials, there is a paper called What Legal Pros Need to Know. If you go to my website, it's, I don't know, probably 20 pages long. And it was a lecture I gave in Lethbridge to a bunch of judges and lawyers and mostly RCMP and local police. And Lethbridge is a very famous place. Lethbridge, 20 years ago, took one constable and said, you're the FASD guy. All of the kids with this problem, they're your problem now. And he had the job for 5 or 6 years, and then they appointed another one. So what the police department was smart enough to do is find one guy, train him up, and that was his thing. Again, it was a relationship thing, and I met them, and they were quite decent chaps, and they were very good at their job. They must have been, because the city pays for his services, and you notice the different changes. Less ambulance calls, less police calls, less time here, less time in the various social service agencies that get tasked. So these single source policemen, fetal alcohol officer, is something your community might want to think about. Anyway, so let's go to the questions. Now, these aren't my questions. 20 years ago, I went to a lot of conferences, sometimes 10 a year. And so I hear all these experts talking about stuff. Well, after you go to the same conference 5 or 6 times, you kind of get the message, because I have a memory, because I have reasoning abilities, because I realized in this community, it's an adaptive behavior to be fluent what people are talking with. And what these experts said after a while was a series of questions that are set out in the paper, and they're helpful. And this is another really hard question to deal with. Often I would let my kids go to jail. Sounds cruel. A lot of people don't like that, but they would be fed and they're warm. Yes, there's a risk of being taken advantage of in jail. But at the end of the day, sometimes if they're in jail, they could get an assessment, because there are various programs that pay for young offenders if you're in jail. It's a bit like locking the barn door after the horse is stolen, but that's neither here nor there. And what I want to say here is sometimes you have to make very hard decisions. It's not easy to let a kid go to jail. He's hungry. He's got nowhere to live. He has no friends. He may get an assessment. So let's start looking at some questions. And these are just very general questions. And you ask lots of questions. You get curious. First question is he adopted? Most of my clients went through the foster system. My clients that have fetal alcohol and didn't go through the foster system, generally speaking, came from fairly wealthy families. I've met people who were welders, airplane pilots, as a lawyer in New York. They came from very wealthy families, and it's always the same story. They hired someone to sit beside them. They hired someone to go to law school with them, to go to university with them, to keep them on task. They hired someone in the welding shop to get them to be a welder. I'm hurrying, Andrew, I'm hurrying. You want to ask about visits to special doctors, special meds. And there's a whole bunch of material that you can talk about there, because the kids that go through the foster system don't have any of the benefits that you and I have had. And it's really hard to see how privileged we are. Second question is, and this is very difficult, ask about maternal drinking. One client tells me that when he met his mother, he was 20-something years old. And he described his mother as a party girl. He says his father was a mean drunk. That's a clue. That's a clue that maybe your mother was consuming alcohol while pregnant. Did your parents ever spend a night in jail? These are really hard questions, and you have to expect no. And you sort of find another way to go about it. Again, it's a relationship thing. You will be surprised when people open up. You will be surprised what they will tell you, because they don't remember everything, but some things will stick in their brain. As you know, memory has a connection to emotions. If there's a lot of emotion and a lot of feeling on a topic or an incident, it will be remembered. Some people in small towns go to the bartenders, go around to the various places where people drink. Do you remember this person? Sometimes it's a dead letter, but sometimes one social worker told me one bartender told her everything she needed to know. It was very helpful. And you have to find out, because maternal drinking is the key. Turning to page 9, Andrew. Get a piece of paper out and draw a grid. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. How old were you in grade 1? How old were you in grade 4? How old were you in grade 7? Did you make it to grade 9? And when you get this developmental grid, you can start asking other questions. Do you know how to ride a bike? Can you tie your shoelaces? You start asking certain questions, ask them to write something. Notice how they hold the pen. There are all kinds of things that you can look at. Many people are stuck on the face. They want to look at the face and see the magic, because there's various things that you can notice about the face. The human face is made between a 24-hour window between day 18 and day 20. If mom starts drinking on day 16 and starts drinking on day 25, there's no facial damage. It's hard to say 1%, 10%, 5% of people present with the facial disformity. Don't be stuck on the face. Ask yourself, what's going on in that brain? I wouldn't do that. Ooh, what is that all about? My friend Ernie talks about what's underneath that. What's underneath that? And you really have to be curious. Did you have to see special teachers at school? Are you good at art and music? Is there some particular skill they have? Because they may have something and that may interest you. Then you may go find and talk to a coach. You'd be surprised. Earlier, I mentioned the Vineland scales. I'm assuming that you know what the Vineland scales are. The Vineland scales are a psychological instrument. You do not give it to the person. You give it to the people in his circle. So you get other people that know him that tell you something about it, and it's a psychological instrument that can give you some very good information. Going back to adaptive behaviors, the woman's name is Russell, Dr. Russell, and she's a psychologist. in Nanaimo, BC, and she's written the paper about this. Are there gaps between what he says and what he comprehends? Jan Lucky talks about non-compliance versus non-comprehension. The entire justice system is about one concept: compliance. Compliance. If you don't follow this probation order, there's more bad stuff coming. And most of the people in the justice system really do want to protect the community by changing behavior. Yes, there's still some old people out there that are big on punishment. This will learn you. I'm going to put you in a cell and you'll learn. That's a whole philosophical debate. But non-comprehension versus non-compliance, you're going to have to unpack that. And it's not it's not like taking one of those tests in school with the pencil. You fill in A, B, and C. It's kind of a human sort of thing. And I'm sure you know all the people to read. You read Maslow and Carl Rogers and stuff, people like that. The whole client-centered psychology. I'm going to tell a story for a quick story. There was a judge in Vancouver that everybody scrambled to get in front of to plead guilty. Anyways, he sent one of my kids, long problems, to the Vancouver pound to walk dogs. It turns out he likes dogs, and dogs like to be walked at the pound. The little old ladies and the people that drive Volvo at the pound, they like dog walkers because they got all these animals and somebody's got to walk them and they're too busy. Changed his life. It was like black and white. First time in his life, he had endless love and he had a purpose. And there was a fireman at this place that said, I'll take you shopping because that's where problems happen. I'll take you to your probation. That's an external brain. And this judge, intuitively, he was at the end of his career, he would look at people and he'd talk and he'd get a few answers. He'd get a sense, oh, Mr. Boulding, I see he's pled guilty 12 times to the same thing. I'm guessing that's not working. And so you get out of the punishment road and you get into a different road. I suggest, there's Andrew again. Thank you, Andrew. The paper is in the materials. There's 10 questions. I recommend you take a look at them because they will help you with your assessments. How are we doing for time, Andrew?
We have about 2 minutes and there's some questions as well.
Okay.
Some people haven't,
I'm on page 10. It's what works. Take a look at page 10. Relationship, friends, coaches. I had a judge listen to a football coach, and the judge says, if you go to practice and you go to all the games, we'll come back in 6 months. Works. There's a bunch of things said out there. I really want to emphasize the Asante Center in British Columbia. A group of parents hired Dr. Asante, and for 20 years, they've changed the world. They have a tremendous website. There's all kinds of materials on that. But at the end of the day, it was a group of parents that raised the money, that rented a building and hired a doctor. Don't expect the governments to do this because there's a thing in the back of our brain thinking they shouldn't get away with this. So there's real reluctance on the part of governments to help this population. Expect failure. You're trying to fit a brain with missing pieces into an angry, fast, unfeeling world. Think younger. 10 to 13 years old, learn that. Chronological age is not brain age. There's lots of different things. My last word here says, match the brain to the task. That's really hard because their brain is not like my brain. I'm a big fan of this. This is the best teaching video on fetal alcohol that's ever been made from the Asante Center, and it's with Dr. Julianne Connery. She developed the mnemonic, the alarm thing. This is another excellent book. It's about exercise, and again, there's lots to learn about that. How are we doing, Andrew?
we're just about up for time right now.
Okay. Do we have time for questions, or did I talk too much?
No, it's perfect. If you're ready for questions.
Please, please.
So Snehill's going to share some of the questions that came in the Q&A box as well as the chat. So thank you everyone for typing those in. Over to you, Snehill.
Thanks, Candice. So a couple of questions. The first one is regarding deaf clients. So the question is, I need to know how you communicate with deaf clients to understand this due to American Sign Language and difficult comprehension. How to solve this one? I believe this is in relation to FASD.
I had a deaf witness once. I've never had a deaf client. There was a lawyer in Vancouver who was deaf. All those clients went to him. I think his name was Henry Vlug, V-L-U-G. He's a bearded fellow. I went to law school with him, but they went to Henry. So I have nothing to help you with.
Thanks for that, David. Our second question is about FASD diagnosis regarding children. So the question is, if kids with FASD are not diagnosed early, then they come in contact with the criminal justice system. How do they know that there is a diagnosis of FASD?
Who's the they?
I believe this is referring the child or the youth that would have FASD but is undiagnosed or was not diagnosed early. And then they come into contact with the criminal justice system. How would the system know that there could be a diagnosis of FASD?
I think that's a better phrasing. I'll be blunt. It's not my client's job to say, I have this problem. That's our job. So there was a question I saw about what the police can do. Julie Connery developed a mnemonic called ALA alarm. And you ask questions in those domains. You open your eyes and you find out, you know, this kid's been arrested 12 times for shoplifting and nothing more serious. That's curious. This kid's from one of the foster group homes. And I've got lots of stories about that, but here's the short story. It's our duty to educate ourselves. Judges, prosecutors, corrections, social workers, we have to know this stuff because that's our job. And the problem is, it's not easy. And so if you're a police officer, I don't know if you know what police officers do, but I recommend if you want to learn, read this book. This is by Professor Bailey. He knows more about police than most police do. Police have a very difficult job. And here's the trick about police. Like a probation officer, they have tremendous discretion. They can say, and quick story. I have a client and I give him here's it right here somewhere. Yeah. I give him my business card and I drive into his head and I say, you're always polite to police officers. You never speak to police officers. Always ask, show this card. Well, one day there's a bunch of crazy stuff going on and 9 kids get arrested, a bunch of B&Es. And so all the kids are on, giving the police officer a hard time. My client, according to the police officer, is standing at attention with my business card up in front of his face for 20 minutes. So the police officer says, this is a bit unusual. And my client says, I'm always to be polite to police officers, and I'm always supposed to show you this card and ask to see a lawyer. Short story is, my kid gets a ride home, the other 8 kids get arrested. So there are things you can do, but a police officer, like a probation officer, has to be sensitive to the brain. What's all these other kids, you know, they're wearing skateboarding clothes and they're looking tough, and there's one kid there standing there like this with a business card. There's a message in that. His brain is not like the other brains. And it's really hard because police officers work so hard, so fast. Until you want an experience in life, I've done many ride-alongs with police. And Alaska, you know, Texas, Texas, don't get arrested in Texas. But it's very hard to be a police officer. And they're trainable. You start with the alarm mnemonic and you start reading some of Diane Malbin's books. Next question, Snell.
Thank you, David. Our next question comes regarding opportunities of crime regarding FASD. So the question is, could some of teens that are involved in crimes of opportunity, such as beating someone on the subway, and then there's ... FASD. So I'm assuming that the question is about the connection between FASD and teenagers that may be involved in crimes of opportunity.
In my experience, my clients don't think of the crime, don't engineer the crime. My clients are followers. My clients want friends. My clients want to be with the cool people. And you'll find over and over again, my clients get arrested. I had a client arrested for joyriding once, but it was a standard transmission. We went to trial, and I pointed out that there's a thing called drop foot. Well, my client had drop foot. I don't think he could drive a standard anyways, but it became apparent that he couldn't shift a standard transmission. So I pitched to the judge, yeah, he was there, but he wasn't the one doing the donuts in the middle of the football field. He can't drive a standard, but he was, yes, he was there. Yes, on 18 of these thefts, he was there. And so you want to take a look at who's the boss, who's the brains, because I'm not saying my clients are stupid. They don't have the planning. They don't have the memory. They don't have the idea, run. I've had a client's in front of a donut store, in front of a hairdresser, and he's trying to break into this little old lady's car. She calls the police. The police notify, there's a police car parked 3 or 4 slots away. The police know this kid and they're watching, they're having donuts. And they try to tell us, don't worry about it. We got it under control. So they watch this kid for several minutes trying to break into this car. I think he'd seen something on a TV show. Anyways, the police walk up and they, what does my client do? He holds out his hands and he says, you got me this time. That's a clue. There's something going on in that brain. Car thieves are opportunistic and they happen like that. But this kid was, and I have to laugh. They're having their coffee and donuts and the police officer watching this inept criminal. These are criminals with high risk and little payoff. Break into a house, watch a movie, they eat chips with some stuff they're going to steal is on their front porch and a pillowcase, but they're in the front room eating chips when the family comes back because they're watching a movie. Everybody's got the same stories. So think high risk, little payoff, not leaders. Does that help? And don't think they don't do murders. They do. 1 in a million. I'm aware of the ones that have gone very bad. But for the bulk of crimes, they're small stuff. And the trick is they don't graduate. They don't have the skills to sell dope. They can't negotiate. They can't know the value of this. And so that's why they're couriers. Does that help?
Thanks, David. We have a couple more questions. The next one asks, how is Canada or provinces in general coming along with working with FASD and the justice system?
Ontario's got a lot of money. They've done a lot of things. British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba are smarter. They got together and they formed this something alliance, and they hired Dr. Claren to run the research. Manitoba's doing the new research on who's in jail and how often. There have been some tremendous advances. I've gone to Australia. Australia's 35 years behind us. I've been to places in Texas and Missouri that you would not believe what goes on there. We're a very advanced country, mostly because of the charter, but mostly because we have a lot of people like you that go to court and do the right thing. We have a whole new crop of judges in Canada, unlike American and Australian judges. You apply to be a provincial court judge, and you get selected if you're a Supreme Court judge. You can't say, I want to be a judge. You got to go through a process. We have a very good judiciary. It's not perfect. We put too many people in jail. Compared to the rest of the world, we're very close to being perfect. And one of the things that really separates us, and this is key, Canada has created a body of research. There's an enormous amount of resources that social workers and judges can call upon. It starts here with Diane Malbin, and it goes all the way up to these medical textbooks. And the thing about the research is it's science. And I know today it's not popular to say science, but that's how we put a man on the moon. That's why we can do heart transplants. And there's a lot to science and fetal alcohol. The simple stuff can help. A judge wants something to hang his hat on. What can you tell me? I got to protect the community. How can we design structures? There's lots of science out there to tell you what works. Okay.
Thanks, David. Our next question is, what are some good strategies police officers can use to help them determine if the subject person we're dealing with has FASD?
Okay, this is a repeat. Julie Connery, professor, says use the alarm mnemonic. I'm saying if you go to my paper, 10 questions you can ask. The first question the police officer's got to ask is, where are you from? Are you from one of the group homes? Click. He's probably adopted. Ask a few more questions. Look at the person. Ask a bit about it. Inquire. Ask yourself, his brain's not like my son's brain. What are the differences? You know, look at those domains in the alarm mnemonic. You know, what is going on with that brain? There's a senior police officer in Vancouver caught 3 kids from a group home digging up the lifeguard's chair down at Kitts Beach. Now you have to understand the lifeguard chair, it's in about 18 inches of sand, but there's a big concrete block underneath it. These kids thought it would be cool to take the chair back to their group home. This police officer shows up, comes up, scares the bejesus out of them. You know what he does? He gets them down, he makes them do, I don't know, 10 or 15 push-ups. Those kids over the years always told me the story about that police officer telling them you don't steal chairs because they had to do push-ups right then and there. You know, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, the police lights are on them, but there's something about that immediacy of consequences, because the idea of memory, they don't deal with consequences like you and I do. They will sit in a jail cell thinking, why am I here? Oh, it's dinner time soon. We have to change how we think. Does that help?
Thanks, David. Our next question is, are people often misdiagnosed with FASD?
Again, this is embarrassing. There are a whole bunch of probation officers out there that are doing their best, and they do these probation reports, and they talk about the anger problem, this problem. There's a whole list of things from the DSM, but they don't want to go saying this is fetal alcohol, because they don't have the skills, they don't have the credentials. So most of these kids are misdiagnosed, and Diane Melvin calls it word salad. If you have 3 or 4 probation reports, you'll have 6 or 7 different psychiatric conditions. And as Kieran O'Malley says in this book, start with attention deficit, because that's easy, that's fashionable. And it's really hard for a police, prosecutor, defense counsel, judge, probation, even corrections to say, hold it. There's something wrong with this person's brain, because I wouldn't do that. My son wouldn't do that. And you have to start from curiosity. The problem with misdiagnosis is, it's like going to the hospital with a broken arm and they take your gallbladder out. That's not a good outcome. And if we're thinking about outcomes, you have to start with matching the brain. What is going on in that brain? Because it's not like my brain. Okay?
Thanks so much, David. Our next question is, can a judge order an assessment for FASD as part of a sentence?
Short answer is no. It's been litigated. I lost it. And the judge can't tell the provincial government how to spend its money. Now, the judge can look at programs, he can suggest things, and there's a judge in Vancouver used to make these long, page-long probation orders that tried to have that, but it's really hard. Now, there's some dispute about whether a Supreme Court judge can do it. There's all kinds of legal issues there. I think that eventually, if you want an assessment, you're going to have to either find a Supreme Court judge that's got some cojones, or you're going to have to make a charter application, because governments don't want to pay for this, and that's the short story. It's very hard for a judge to tell a government, you must spend money here. It's not impossible, but most of these cases don't go to Supreme Court. They're in provincial court. And a provincial court judge doesn't have that power.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question is.
I just wanted to interrupt. We have about 5 minutes left.
Thank
So
you,
maybe
Andrew.
We're okay, Andrew. Thank you for flagging. As long as we just hold a minute or two at the end, so I can obviously thank David and wrap things up. That's great.
Our next question is, I understand the idea of the external brain. The challenge we encounter is the pushback against structure rules and routines when trying to provide housing support. How do you work collaboratively with someone with the external brain concept?
Seattle has a program called PCAP. It started at the University of Washington, and they had several dry runs, and that city paid for it for a while. The university paid for it for a while, and the city finally said, "We're going to pay for this," because there are less call-outs in ambulances, less problems in the school system, less problems in the hospital, and less police involvement. The program was saving the city a lot of money, and it always comes down to money. So at the end of the day, you know, there's a bit of a NIMBY problem, not in my backyard, thank you very much, and there's all kinds of issues like that. There are lots of people doing lots of things, and most of them, like the Exonic Center, for example, they spend a great deal of their time raising money to do their programs. And at the end of the day, this is a very difficult question, but you'll find out that when the people are in supportive housing, guess what? Less crime. Duh, but it's expensive. And the police love it, but city council has to pay for it. And that's why when you have these conversations, I set it out in the lawyer's brief right here. It's a multi-sector program. Schools, police, social, legal, medical, national, municipalities, they all have to be at the same table because it's all coming out of your pockets. I mean, they cost thousands of dollars per person. What does housing cost? Less than that. What does supervision cost? Less than that. Here's a short story. Every senior probation officer I've ever met says, give me 10 or 15 kids and they'll never commit another crime. Yet most probation officers have 80 to 150 kids on their list. That's a waste of time. So we got to be kind to probation officers, hire more, but have less numbers, more contact, more relationship. That's how you solve this problem. Is that helpful? I know I sound like a little old lady, you know, screaming at the moon, but this is not difficult stuff. You know, this is not difficult stuff. It's hard stuff because of money, but also we have this, I'm not like that. I wouldn't do that. And it's really hard to see people with disabilities when the disability is invisible.
Thank you, Dr. Boulding. I think we have about a minute left now.
Thank you, Andrew. The doctor is my uncle.
Yeah.
He was a psychiatrist.
Everyone. David, I just wanted to say on behalf of the Secretariat team and the attendees, thank you so much for coming today to share your expertise and learnings. I think everyone really enjoyed the presentation. I just wanted to share some of the comments that were coming through the chat for you. So someone said, good afternoon, Mr. Boulding. It's good to see and hear from you. It's very encouraging to see you're still working on this. Your candid, down-to-earth presentation is insightful and more than helpful. Thank you. This has been an awesome presentation. Thank you. This has been very interesting. This training was great. Thank you so much. And I look forward to getting the recording and slideshow. And so on that note, we will be sending out the slides, David's presentation notes, the resources, everything that was discussed today. Do not worry, we'll be sending it to participants. In addition to that, it will be posted on the HSJCC website in the coming days, meaning if you know of folks that were unable to attend, please feel free to direct them there and they will be able to get all this information. Thanks so much, everyone, for engaging with us today and attending. And thank you again, David.